Enough already. On my third birthday, once again, I was absent from the family photos. The nighttime view of Manhattan sprawled beneath me like shattered diamonds. The windows of the penthouse I live in frame the city's glitter like a single painting. But that light didn't reach my heart. In the crystal glass in my hand, the finest vintage champagne fizzed in vain. As a cosmetic surgeon, I had achieved success. I run multiple clinics, and my skills are highly regarded in the industry. The media praised me as a wizard of beauty, and my lifestyle was featured in many women's magazines. Most of what I wanted could be bought with a single card. This penthouse, the Italian sports car resting in the garage. Everything I've achieved, I earned through my own effort. Yet the more wealth I amassed, the more an unrelenting thirst gnawed at my heart. What I truly wanted was the simple word, congratulations, that I hadn't heard from my family even once in these past 3 years. Why do I feel so unfulfilled? Since I was young, I had always been a good child. I studied tirelessly to live up to my parents' expectations, and I pursued medicine out of a desire to ease my fragile mother's worries. While my younger sister acted freely, I always disciplined myself. But at some point, my success began building an invisible wall between me and my family. In their eyes, I no longer appeared merely as their daughter, or as a sister, but as something else entirely. That sense of unease had long settled heavy in my chest like sediment. And eventually, that uneasy premonition became a certainty. The silence then was far too incongruous for a day that should be one of celebration. The champagne had no taste. It was only cold liquid sliding down my throat. It all began 3 years ago, on what was supposed to be an ordinary day. I couldn't sit still from the morning, picking up my smartphone over and over. Yet by nightfall, no one had contacted me. Frustrated, I called my mother, and on the other end of the line came a light, unbothered voice as if she were talking about the weather. I'm sorry. I've been so busy I completely forgot." That single phrase silenced my world. I didn't want a present. I just wanted her to remember, even for a moment, the day when her daughter came into the world. That wish crumbled away, unbearably fragile. And then came the second year. That memory struck me again, this time as an even sharper pain. On a first-class flight to an overseas conference, I scrolled through my sister's SNS and saw photos of a grand birthday party for her son. They had rented out a famous hotel, theme park characters were dancing, and the family smiled brightly, surrounded by mountains of presents. Those radiant photos highlighted my own loneliness. A pang ran through my chest, but I forced myself to say, it can't be helped if it's for the child. However, on my own birthday, I hesitantly reached out to my mother, and what came back was an unforgettable line. "You're an adult now, so don't make a fuss over your birthday." Her incredulous voice stabbed my faint hopes with a cold knife named contempt, completely annihilating them without a trace. After hanging up, I stared at the sea of clouds outside the window for a while. No tears came. I could only feel something deep inside me freezing over. Was the phrase, "because you're an adult," just a convenient spell to shut down my emotions? If that's the case, I resolved to never again hope like a child in front of them. Yes, I had sworn that firmly. Then the fateful third year came. It was then that I finally came face to face with their true nature. It happened when I casually opened my Instagram during a break at work. My sister had tagged a post as "friends only." Visible, there was the living room of my familiar family home. There was a large chocolate birthday cake in the center of the photo. On the plate, my name was written in slightly crooked letters. My father, mother, sister, her husband, and their children were all smiling around the cake. Yes, everyone in the family was there. Except me. I couldn't breathe. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had deliberately, and with utmost clarity, excluded only me, celebrating my birthday without me, as if mocking my very existence. Their joyful smiles squeezed my heart like a vice. Why? Why me? At that moment, every fragment of my past connected into one. What they expect from me is not who I am as a daughter. I am only useful to them as a convenient sponsor, someone they can rely on when they need money. My success was never a blessing to them. It was merely a resource to be utilized. The taste of champagne, the city night view stretching before me, the career I had built, all of it suddenly felt meaningless. Yet in the depths of despair, a cold flame ignited in my heart. It was not sadness. It was anger. I quietly closed my smartphone and stood up. The face reflected in the mirror was colder and more resolute than ever before. I would never again allow them to disturb the peace of my mind, and I decided to completely separate their existence from my life. I vowed to escape the curse of what is called family. With that single intention, I began to act. I chose to create a sanctuary for my soul. Why did I choose a villa in the mountains? City life had given me wealth and fame, but it had also brought relentless noise. Reservation calls, reports from staff, invitations to conferences, and occasionally, requests for money from my family. My time was constantly consumed by others, and my spirit was steadily worn down. What I sought was a place governed only by complete solitude and the kind of silence like a ringing in the ears. A place where no expectations, jealousy, or desire could reach me. Like a castle in the sky. I consulted multiple real estate agents and had them list properties across the US, and sometimes even abroad. Yet none of them captured my heart. Then one day, an agent prefaced with, "This is a bit unusual," and showed me that land. It was priced at a total of $15 million. I hesitated for a moment, but the moment I saw the photos of untouched nature and the log house quietly standing in the forest, my soul trembled. This is where I belong. I will never forget the day I visited the land for the first time after completing the contract. The moment I got out of the car, I was enveloped by the rich scent of wood and the smell of damp earth. The songs of unknown birds, sounds that could never be heard in the city, rained down like music of blessing. Standing on the terrace of the villa, green carpets extended endlessly below, and a private golf course stretched out before me. The wind brushed my cheeks, accompanied only by the rustling of leaves in the trees. I took a slow, deep breath and felt the toxins in my body being cleansed. This is my castle, a kingdom that belongs only to me, impervious to anyone. I must protect this silence, this peace, no matter what. Yes, I swore this strongly in my heart, but I was not simply lost in a dream. My vigilance had been sharpened to a razor's edge by countless experiences in the past, as if I were a predator. Back when the clinic's startup funds were still insufficient, my mother demanded practical financial support, saying, "Make the clinic look impressive for the sake of our relatives." When I refused, she went around the neighborhood spreading rumors, saying, "My daughter is cold." At my sister's wedding, as expected, she tried to make me cover the entire cost of the overseas ceremony, saying, "You're the older sister. You should be able to afford this, right?" Their demands escalated year after year, asking me to cover the children's tuition, overseas trips, and even the purchase of luxury goods. They seemed to think my wallet belonged to them. These experiences taught me something. For them, family ties are nothing more than a free pass to justify infinite demands. That is why I needed to build, in this castle, not only physical walls, but legal ones as well. I immediately contacted a skillful lawyer who specializes in asset planning. After listening to my story, he quietly said, "Do not fight with emotions. The weapons we should use are unshakable facts and the law that supports them." His advice cleared my mind. We immediately began taking action. First, we established an LLC, a limited liability company, solely to manage and own this property. The procedures were complicated, but this was an invisible shield and a legal armor to protect my assets and privacy from greedy hyenas. I transferred all ownership to the LLC and ensured that my personal name was erased from all public documents. This was not merely a defensive measure. It was a declaration of war from me, aimed at redefining my relationship with them under the law. Yet I wanted to share the joy of my new life with someone. Just a little, as a small gift. I posted a single photo on social media, taken from the terrace of my mountain house, capturing a blazing sunset. With just one caption, "My new hideaway." Little did I know that would be the fateful cannon signaling the end of my peaceful days. Just hours after the post, a family chat notification broke through the silence. It was from my mother. "Your sister was just looking for a big house for her children. We'll move in on Friday. Thank you so much." It was an insane, one-sided message. Just when I was at a loss in surprise and anger, I received a message from my sister asking for a follow-up. "The house is too big for a single person like you, right? We'll make use of it, so you should be grateful." Grateful? It was as if I had bought a $15 million castle for them. I was so angry that I couldn't even laugh anymore. This was reality. Unfortunately, my premonition was never wrong, but the real fear came later. A few days later, I received a suspicious call from the company that entrusted the management of the villa. The other day, I received a request from a person claiming to be your mother asking for a duplicate key. My blood boiled. My mother was trying to get a duplicate key to my castle illegally without my knowledge. In addition, I received a confirmation call from the local county sheriff's office saying, someone claiming to be your relative is trying to apply for vehicle registration with the Department of Motor Vehicles at an address you own. They were simply no longer family. I stared at my smartphone screen and began to plan a counterattack quietly and coldly. I had no intention of showing mercy to these crazy invaders. From then on, it was a cold-hearted battlefield where only law and intelligence reigned, with no room for sentimentality or family love. That night, I knocked on the door of the office of an old lawyer in the city center named John. He listened quietly to me behind his heavy mahogany desk. His eyes were full of deep insight, which must have unraveled many complex human patterns under the law. When I had finished presenting the whole story and the evidence I had begun to gather, he nodded deeply and crossed his fingers. This is not just a real estate dispute between relatives. It is a premeditated and vicious infringement of rights caused by their own jealousy of your financial success and independence. They fight with emotions, but we will fight with unshakable facts and the laws that support them. John's words transformed the chaotic anger in my mind into a clear strategy. We simulated every possible scenario until the middle of the night. First, there was the possibility that they might take extreme measures, bringing a locksmith and attempting to break in physically. We believed this was the scenario with the highest likelihood. In this case, we need to completely secure the scene and involve the police, especially when they are attempting to trespass, John said. Next, there was the possibility that they might use the media or social media to craft a tragic story of a successful daughter evicting her poor family from the house in order to win public sympathy. In response, we prepared objective evidence to counteract them, such as records of their past financial demands and forged contracts. They will probably try to corner you mentally and make you feel guilty, ultimately forcing you to comply with their demands. That's why you must not engage with them directly at all. Everything must go through me. This is a fight to protect your dignity and your future, John said firmly. His words made me realize I was not alone, and my heart felt a little lighter. For the first phase of our plans, we filed for a temporary restraining order with the court, which was granted immediately. It would be a clear crime the moment they set foot on my land. But that legal barrier alone wasn't enough. I needed to record their actions perfectly. The next day, I contacted one of the top security consulting firms in the country. Together with them, I upgraded the defense system of my property to what could only be called a military level. From the entrance gate to the villa's front door, back door, and every window, we added the latest security cameras capable of clearly identifying faces and license plates in 4K resolution even at night, eliminating all blind spots. It was no longer just about security. It was a system for surveillance and evidence collection. I replaced the front door with a Swiss-made smart lock that could not be opened with a physical key, requiring 3 steps: my fingerprint, vein authentication, and a randomly generated passcode. These investments alone cost about as much as a luxury car, but for the sake of my peace and safety, it was a reasonable price. However, just waiting wasn't enough. I decided to take a more proactive approach. Following John's advice, I contacted a reliable private investigation company and hired 2 skilled investigators. The task I gave them was simple: monitor my family, especially my mother and sister, 24/7 until the planned day on Friday, and report in detail who they meet and what they do. Backed by my financial resources, the investigators deployed the latest equipment and personnel without sparing any expense. Then, one day, I obtained decisive evidence. An envelope from an unfamiliar law firm had been mistakenly delivered to the mailbox at the villa. The sender was a lawyer in the town where my sister lived. Feeling a sense of foreboding, I opened it and found a draft of a forged document titled Family Residence Agreement. The rent was an absurd $100 per month. Furthermore, in the section for the contractor, there was a clumsy signature clearly imitating my handwriting. The malice and premeditation made me feel nauseous. Yet this was merely one of the critical pieces of evidence that God had provided to prove their wrongdoing. Holding that contract, I deliberately called my mother. I put the phone on speaker mode and, following John's instructions, pressed the record button on my IC recorder. Mom, about my house. Before I could finish, my mother interrupted, launching into her speech as if she had been waiting for this moment. Ah, finally you're ready to talk. Your sister and the kids are thrilled about your new house. Managing such a large home would be hard for you alone, right? We'll make proper use of it, so you should be grateful. I calmly, but feigning slight ignorance, asked, But it's so sudden. Then my mother, with an air of triumph, began revealing their plans in full. It's okay. I've asked a professional to do all the paperwork. You just need to sign it. If you use that house as collateral, you can pay off the debt of your sister's husband's business, and we can kill two birds with one stone. The moment I heard those words, any remaining feeling I had for them completely disappeared from my heart. Not only did they try to take away my house, but they also intended to burden me with huge debts. Reports from the investigators arrived one after another. An audio recording of my sister contacting several locksmiths in the city to get an estimate for their services. A hidden camera footage of my mother meeting with a moving company and triumphantly explaining the amount of their luggage. A record of my father visiting the government office to discuss the transfer of ownership of real estate in the name of the LLC. All the pieces were connected into one, and the whole picture of their ugly desires emerged with frightening clarity. For Friday, the final day, I finished arranging all the pieces on the board. At the clinic, I was focused on smiling at my patients as usual and bringing out their beauty to the fullest. But under my white coat, my heart was burning with the battle that awaited me over the weekend. Occasionally, memories of my childhood would suddenly come back. A summer day when my sister and I set off fireworks in the garden of our parents' house. The night my mother took care of me all night because I had a fever. Those memories were sweet, but came to hurt so much. However, as if to shake off that sentimentality, I looked at the forged contracts and investigation reports. This was not a battle to protect the beautiful memories of the past. It was an inevitable war to protect my future and my dignity. On the eve of the decisive confrontation, I was alone in my quiet mountain house. The huge monitor in the living room showed images from more than a dozen cameras installed on the premises in real time. Forests emerging in the dark, approaches shrouded in silence, tightly closed gates. Everything was under my control. I took a sip of cold Earl Grey and quietly waited for the dawn to break in this perfect fortress. All that was left was to wait for the stupid invaders to catch this spider web themselves. The fateful Friday had arrived. That morning was eerily clear, like the calm before a storm. The mountain air was crisp, and the gentle chirping of birds resonated peacefully. However, inside the house, a tense atmosphere dominated, as if it were a command center awaiting an impending battle. I waited calmly for the moment, as if I were the lead actor coldly awaiting the start of a play. On the living room's low table, there was only coffee in a thermal pot and cups for each person present. Opposite me sat my lawyer, John, and on a slightly distant sofa, two robust-looking veteran deputies from the local county sheriff's office quietly took their seats. They hardly spoke, yet their mere presence added the absolute weight of the law to this space. John set down his cup and ran down the plan one last time. All right, remember, when they arrive, you must not say a word. No matter what insults they throw at you, or how they try to elicit pity with tears, you must never show your emotions. Your silence is our greatest weapon. Leave everything to us. I nodded silently. I was already prepared emotionally. The sentiment that had tormented me for years no longer existed in my heart. 2:14 p.m. Breaking the silence, a faint electronic beep sounded from the gate sensor. The feed from the surveillance camera appeared on the living room's massive monitor. Along with the heavy sound of tires crunching gravel, the first thing to enter my view was a huge truck marked with the logo of a major moving company. Behind it slid my familiar father's luxury sedan. I stared at the monitor intently. The sight of my family stepping out of the cars was far more ridiculous and grotesque than I had imagined. My mother, as if she had become the new mistress of this castle, shouted instructions at the moving team leader. My father proudly crossed his arms, gazing at the house's grandeur. And my younger sister, pulling a child along, acted as if taking a commemorative photo with her smartphone, hopping about excitedly. On their faces, there was not a trace of guilt, nor any thought for me. There was only the shameless certainty of victory, the belief that they had lawfully taken someone else's property. I've called the locksmith, so let him in immediately. My mother's high-pitched voice came through clearly via the high-performance microphone. Soon, a small van arrived and a man in work clothes got out. Seeing him head toward the entrance with his toolbox, John gave me a subtle nod. Time's up. I slowly stood up and took a deep breath, just once. My heart was remarkably calm. It was as if I were gathering my mental focus before performing surgery, an extreme calmness that took hold of me. John and the two deputies followed behind me. Step by step, our footsteps toward the entrance echoed unusually loudly. The intercom blared loudly, and the monitor displayed my father pounding on the front door and shouting, "This is our house." His face was flushed and red. I unlocked the smart lock with fingerprint recognition and placed my hand on the solid oak doorknob. Then, slowly but with no hesitation, I opened the door inward. Their noise flowed in with the bright light outside. And in that light, my family's smiles froze instantaneously, as if time had stopped the moment they saw me. Their gaze went past my face and fixed on the presence of unfamiliar men standing behind me. A sharp-eyed lawyer in a suit staring directly at them. And flanking him, two strong deputy sheriffs in uniform. Even the movers and the locksmith were dumbfounded, unable to understand what was happening, simply staring at the strange scene. The first to snap back to reality was my father. "What are you doing? Entering someone's house without permission." His voice was a clear bluff. At that moment, the older deputy sheriff stepped forward and broke the silence. He completely ignored my father's words and pulled several documents from a thick envelope he was holding. "We are deputies executing our duties under a court order. We have several legal notifications and warnings for you." Everyone present held their breath at that calm yet profoundly authoritative voice. The deputy first held one of the documents up directly in front of my father. "This is a formal TRO, a temporary restraining order issued by the court on the petition of the corporation that owns this land and building. All of your families are hereby strictly prohibited from entering this site from today onwards." My father's face changed from red with anger to blue with astonishment. My mother hysterically shouted, "This must be some kind of mistake. After all, I am the owner's mother." But the deputy sheriff didn't change his expression at all. "Your relationship has no effect on the validity of this order, and—" He handed my father another document. "This case has been formally sent to the district attorney's office on charges of forgery and attempted grand larceny. And here, apart from that, is a civil lawsuit seeking damages against all of you." "Significant theft?" my sister muttered in a trembling voice. At that moment, the first person to completely collapse was my sister's husband. "Oh, this is completely crazy. You guys said everything is legal. I don't want to go to jail. There's no way we can live here." He cried and ran to his car as if he were literally scattering spider babies and left at breakneck speed. The movers and locksmiths then completely understood what was happening. When they looked at each other, they silently put away their tools without being instructed by anyone and returned to their cars in a hurry. The only people left behind were my family, who were isolated and helpless. The father, mother, and sister just stood there in a daze. My mother looked me in the eye and screamed as if she were making a last wish. "Why have you done such a terrible thing? We're no longer family." As promised to John, I did not say a word. However, with an ice-cold gaze, I quietly looked back at the parasites that had eaten away at my life. My silence was my last, yet most eloquent answer to them. It was a perfect, complete victory, utilizing law and intelligence. And then, the moment finally arrived. The moment when complete peace and silence returned to my castle. However, contrary to the exhilaration of victory, my heart was not entirely clear. The weight of the chains I thought I had broken pressed on my heart like a phantom. Legal victory did not mean emotional closure. John, my lawyer, delivered his report in a calm yet brutally straightforward manner, confronting me with the harsh reality. My father had his social standing and pride completely shattered. On top of being accused of having attempted theft at a grand scale, he faced a civil lawsuit demanding substantial damages, and news of his downfall spread rapidly through his modest community. He lost his country club membership, and his friends began to avoid him. I heard that he shifted all responsibility onto my mother and increasingly drowned himself in alcohol. The authority he once wielded over me completely disappeared. My mother faced the greatest miscalculation of her life. She had been convinced that I would eventually give in, thinking, because we are family. Faced with legal measures beyond her understanding, she lost her will to fight. Berated by my father and stripped of the financial support she had always relied on, the appearance of a wealthy family that she desperately tried to protect collapsed like a castle built on sand. And then my sister Emma and her husband Chris. After that day, Chris literally ran away and never returned to Emma. He hired a lawyer and claimed he was a victim caught up in the Smith family's schemes, demanding a divorce. To him, the Smith family had only been a stepping stone to success, and the moment it turned into a legal risk, it became worthless. The civil lawsuit was concluded by ordering them to pay an amount of compensation that they could not afford. John proceeded with the process of foreclosing my parents' house in Greenwich. It was the house I bought for them, and it was ironically sold to settle the damage they had done to me. One night, a few months after receiving such a report, a phone rang from an unknown number. It was from Emma, who spoke with a trembling voice. She was completely isolated as she lost her home, was abandoned by her husband, and our parents were blaming each other. She now lives in a small apartment with her children. She began to sob and apologize for the first time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've always been jealous of you. I thought that what you got on your own was like a well-deserved right that I should receive. Only now do I really understand how stupid and sinful it was to take what belongs to someone else, and how painful it must have been for you. At those words, I felt the last thorn that had been deeply embedded in my heart quietly melt. The hatred was no longer there. There was only deep sadness and indelible pity for the person who shared my blood. A few weeks later, I invited Emma and her children to my house. On the terrace that was the venue of our previous confrontation, we watched the sunset and talked for hours. She tearfully spoke of her mistakes, how pampered she was, and her distorted feelings for me. I just listened quietly. No one can make up for lost time, and the past mistakes may never go away. However, we may be able to slowly build new relationships, this time with our own hands, as equal human beings. I didn't tell her I had forgiven her until the end. It was because I felt it was too late. Instead, I told her, Emma, I'm going to set up a fund for you and your children to start a new life. But this is not a free gift. This is your last chance to stand on your own feet. Don't live a life by depending on someone else again. It was no longer an unconditional aid like it once was. It was an investment for the future, with clear boundaries and purpose. True strength isn't just about utterly defeating the other person. Sometimes it may be about having the courage to believe in the future of someone who has made mistakes. And true freedom is not about completely discarding the past, but about having the power to redefine future relationships for yourself without being bound by the past.